Hi, my name is Anthony Boyd, and I am a survivor of year after year after year of highly lethal, very dangerous basic D&D and AD&D play. For 7 years, my very first character survived until I stopped playing him. Let that sink in. I played hundreds of different characters, but my very first character, who I played off and on through 7 years, survived everything that I put him through. That first character was a fully fleshed out, highly detailed character who only grew more so over time. Transient characters that I made in 3 to 5 minutes in order to play a game right now when opportunity arose were fleshed out as well as they could be in 3 to 5 minutes, and then continually expanded and became people. That's on me. That's part of who I am as a role player. When I make a character, they are a character, separate and distinct from me. And in a lot of my early groups, a lot of the groups I played with in the middle, and a lot of the groups I encounter even today, I still find people who adopt characters and people who just are themselves. This is independent of whatever game system we're playing. There are some systems which get you thinking more about character, and there are some systems which entirely leave it in your hands. But still, at the end of the day, taking that leap into character is, well, it's on you. Now, I started this clip talking about lethality and being a survivor, but in 1983, when I started playing, we started playing with the rules from 81, we started playing with BX. The reason to play had nothing to do with surviving a lethal game. That's something which evolved later, and we'll come back to that point. The reason why we played was the opportunity to be an active participant in situations which we would never experience. Right? We were a bunch of teenagers living in a small town. We wouldn't be responsible for any kind of adventures on the scale that a D&D character undertakes ever. So, yeah, the ability to make life and death decisions and succeed or fail based on our own wits and abilities, well, that was the reason to play. And I want to notice that I didn't say the ability to be an active participant in a story, because that was never a consideration at all, although it may have been for other groups that I was not a part of. But getting to be a protagonist in dangerous situations, in devious situations, in mysterious situations, and in situations primarily that involved a lot of mystery and exploration rather than combat, that was the reason to play. That was the reason for a role-playing game. Now, I wouldn't encounter any other role-playing games for quite a few years, although my awareness of D&D would evolve as we moved from the 81 set to the 83 set, and then started including AD&D and kind of mixing and matching and blurring all the lines between them. But D&D would be all I would know until 1988. That's a pretty long stretch of time to focus on a single game, on a single point of view, on a single concept. And it means a life in gaming completely uninterrupted by external comparisons. Because we're moving forward in time, right? From the earliest role players until now, we're moving forward into new territory, into new development, something that we can assess and compare and contrast in the context of what we already know. But that first game you play, you can only make internal comparisons. You can compare the mage to the fighter or to the thief or whatever. But you can't compare this version of the mage to that version of the mage. You simply can't. So, Moving forward in time, our comparisons are, well, kind of rooted like this. Somebody seems to be making the games about other things. Stripped down to its basic level, that's it. Now, this might be someone's making the games easier to survive. Someone's making characters more capable. Someone is shifting the focus of the game from exploration to combat. Someone is adding much more variety, right? Someone is opposing the humanocentric view of the game and opening it up so that characters can play anything, no matter how ridiculous it seems to you, or how preposterous it would be that a particular group would be traveling together. Maybe even more preposterous than the paladin with the assassin and the monk and the... Right. So, somewhere along the way, someone started to mess with what you were familiar with for reasons of their own, which they didn't have the page count to explain to you, and you were left to your own devices trying to figure out why. That's progress through the timeline from the past to the future. Looking back, of course, you have your understanding. See, when we all start to play, we all have our first game, and our first game, no matter whether we like that idea or not, defines our perspective of the hobby for a considerable amount of time until you have enough games, in your mind and under your belt that you start to see the picture differently. But those first few games, they're compared directly to each other, and they are your foundation. This is what gaming is. Everything else is different. And if you start moving backwards in time, you don't see people adding to the game system so much as you see things being deleted. Of course, you figure out pretty quick that they're not really being deleted. They hadn't been invented yet, which leads you to believe that they are somehow inferior. Right? If we look at a modern cell phone with all of its smart capabilities and then compare it to one from even 5 years ago, there's reason to believe that you want to stick with the newer, shinier model. Even though there are some aspects of that phone from 5 years ago which were superior to what we have now. Some aspects. And then if we go back and back and back and back, we can see this sort of thing. And eventually we reach a point where the people who are picking up the game are picking it up in isolation, just like we did back when the games were newer, or like the people who picked them up back when they were actually new. Picking it up in isolation, having no points of reference, provides that same experience, right? That same sense of discovery. This is what gaming is. And then, of course, you go on the internet and you start meeting people from different periods of time, each with their own period, their own perspectives, each with their own viewpoints and tastes and biases, and they all start mixing it up. And of course, humans being humans, they start to argue and they start to make pronouncements, and they don't back it up with any sort of fact or anything. It's just true because they said it, and don't question me because you weren't there. I was there. I apparently was present at all gaming everywhere. So, pronouncements made without even the caveats of in my group or in my town or in my region or in the local convention we attended or whatever can be made saying, well, when I started gaming, this is how it was. That runs pretty counter to having an actual productive conversation. I think maybe people will agree. So when you encounter things that saying like old style gaming was lethal, well, that's not untrue. But then there's this sense of you wouldn't be able to survive. I survived, but you who grew up on these different games wouldn't be able to survive. And, well, why is that? When you started gaming in these older games, you knew nothing, and you had to learn. When this other person started in gaming, they knew nothing, and they had to learn. They've gotten good, possibly, at the game that they play now. There's no reason to suspect or expect that they won't be able to do well in any other game that they try. If, and this is the big point, the one that tends to get missed, if they're willing to take that step back and look at the game as something new. To learn that game as it is. Not to try and play, I don't know, D&D 5th edition in AD&D 1st edition. To instead just learn to play AD&D 1st edition. It was fun for us. There's a chance it could be fun for you. It will be different. It's not the same game anymore. But different does not mean not fun. Likewise, if you look around my shelves and others, you'll see various editions of a game. At some point, there's a point you reach where you say, no more editions of this game. I found the one I like and I'm sticking with it. And this is reasonable, isn't it? It's not a denial of progress. It's not being, stuck in the past. It's now understanding that system so well because you've played it so long that the idea of being subject to someone else fiddling with it becomes less and less necessary. For the publisher, this is a way to keep the game in print so that the new generations of gamers can gain access to it. For the publisher, it's a chance to redress some things. It's a chance to compress some things. It's a chance to apply a new level of financial strength to producing a classier product, let's say. But for the long-term gamer, at a certain point, you can play that game, and you yourself can be responsible for determining how the game will be adjusted and how the game will play. It doesn't always have to be a reactionary position of, no, I should not play the new edition. It certainly can be. But again, that's on you, the person who decides to be reactionary. I will not, no more editions. So, taking a chance, taking the time, taking the opportunity to step back and look at the issue more from, a bird's eye view and say, what's really going on here, I think is really valuable. Were old school games more lethal? Were old school GMs adversarial? Were the developments in gaming all improvements? These are important questions to ask. Is there nothing to be gained from these older games? I can say that I became able to learn all these games and enjoy many different types of gaming because I started out the way I did. I think if I had encountered a game which was available in the year that I started, if I had encountered the first Stormbringer, or if I had encountered Call of Cthulhu right away as my first game, I doubt I would have explored as many games as I ended up doing. I would have been able to be far more satisfied and far more able to tinker with the game system than I was starting with basic D&D. And so I'm extremely thankful to the way that basic D&D was put together because it taught me so much about being able to run a game. Things that I might not have learned if I had found a game that I didn't have to question and challenge as much. So, perspective, understanding where you are on the timeline of development, and when you go back looking at older games, remembering to orient yourself to look forward at what is to come, and remove it from your mind. Focus on what is, and if you're someone who has traveled that journey from all the way back when up until now, look at the reasons why someone might choose to twist the game, alter the game, expand the game in the way that they have. What were they trying to do that was different from what we were trying to do in the original versions of the game? What new thing did they want to try? Are they simply making it easier? Are they dumbing down the game? Or are they reaching for something more, something else, something which is obvious to them because they grew up playing this, which wasn't obvious to the people who designed it, which wasn't yet necessary, wasn't yet a thing whose time had not yet come around. So this is a long video. It goes in a lot of different directions. It's addressed to a lot of different people, and yet it's addressed to no one. So I hope those of you have made it through the 14 and some odd minutes, that it has had some value, can contribute at least a little bit to the conversation. But anyway, back to work for me, and back to RPG a day, I suspect.